Hey there guys, welcome back to TopTier Garage. Today we're going to be diving in to the 89 Big Bear by removing the rear swing arm in order to get at the oil seals on the output shafts. You have to pull the whole rear end basically in order to take this guy out to replace the seals. Should be a good time. So the first step in this whole process is to obviously jack up the vehicle. I have a Harbor Freight jack with a cross beam on it, supporting the center of it. It's kind of sketchy, but in order to get the rear tires off, they each have four 17mm lugs. Just set them off to the side then. And in order to make things easier, I am going to remove all the rear plastics and the rear rack. It's fairly simple on these. Up top here, there's two bolts right there that go into the frame, and then one right there. And you also have to remove on the bottom side of the rear fender, you have to remove either one, your choice. Same exact thing on the other side. And then pull out the four 10mm bolts that hold this in. All the ones underneath for the frame were 12mm. You don't exactly have to do this in order to replace it. It's just going to be a lot easier for me to record. And I want to give this thing a full look over because I just purchased it. So with the rear fenders off, this is what it should look like. You'll have easy access to pretty much everything on this side. You have your battery, you have all your electronics. These things are very simple machines when you break it down. So the first thing that I did in order to drop the rear swing arm down was I took out the rear shock. The top bolt is a little tricky to get to. You're going to want to get a 17mm ratcheting wrench, and the bottom is just a super easy pin with a clip that goes through right there. And that's tricky. And that's where the top bolt is. It would be a lot easier if you could actually remove this rear cargo just by removing small bolts from the inside. You'd have super easy access then, but I had the tools to do it right, so. Next step is to tap out the rear axle and then to remove the rear differential. All right, so in order to get to this point where you can see the rear brake caliper, you need to take off the outer plastic little rubber Yamaha thing that covers up this 24mm castle nut. It should have a cotter pin going through it. Mine didn't, so it could possibly loosen up by itself, so it was a good catch that I took that apart. And then behind it should be a washer seated up to your rear hub. And then the cover, which has 3 Phillips head bolts. And that should get you to this point. So then if you come around to the back side, you take out this 12mm bolt that is screwed into the back side here. And then you take off a nut here, and then 3 10mm bolts. And the whole entire thing should slide out. So once everything is removed, this is what it should look like. It has a small dust shield behind the brake, and you should, in a perfect world, you should be able to just tap this shaft and the whole thing should slide out from right to left with no issues. I have been beating on this thing for a while and I cannot get it to move. So I'm going to probably have to press it out. So instead of removing the rear shaft, I am just going to remove the whole swing arm assembly as a whole. So Right here, you have these small pins. You take off these outer little caps. You remove the line that's in the way in order to get that cap out. This nut here is a 27 millimeter, and then the inside is a 6 mil Allen head that sits inside to hold this swing arm in. So it's gonna be really, really loud. But another big tip is to blast the absolute piss out of it with PB Blaster and then work it back and forth. 'Cause this is one thing that you do not want to strip out. If that Allen head gets rounded out, it's game over. You're gonna make it a really, really long project. So once you remove those bushings, if you support the swing arm with a jack right by the pumpkin, it isn't crazy heavy, but it's a little bit of a pain to get out, but it's manageable with one person. So now, once that's off, you have to take the rear universal joint off. So I already took it off because it is a pain. So what you have is these small clips that go around on the external side of each of them. If you get lucky enough, you can take a small flathead screwdriver and just hit them, and they'll actually pop off. You only want to take out the two that are on the rear, so it'll be right here and right there. You only want to take those out because then you don't have to touch the other side and it can just stay in place and you don't have to worry about messing anything up. But then in order to get it fully out, when it's in there, you actually have to hit on the opposite U-joint in order to get these small needle bearings out. And if you hit them, if they're not too rusty, they'll pop out decent. But as you can see, you gotta be careful that you don't lose any of the needles. And you're better off probably just replacing them while they're out anyways. But then you just remove that, and then we're gonna spin that nut off. And then probably take these 4 bolts out and try to separate it from the motor. So after you remove the rear universal joint and then those 4 bolts, the whole thing should actually pivot out and up. You're gonna make a freaking huge mess and there's gonna be oil everywhere. That's minor details. So then you leave a track of shit all the way over. And here she is, it's out. I already separated it. You shouldn't have to touch anything on this guy, but you're gonna need to, that's the seal we want. So we're gonna have to replace that seal and that seal for the bottom. But we're gonna have to split the case because it's pressed on from the inside, if I was looking at the prints correct. Almost there. So in order to get this top seal out, it's kind of a pain in the ass. It is downward facing, but I got this nice tool from O'Reilly's. It's just Performance Tool W1219. It's not bad, but I did get a little carried away, and on the very corner there you could see that I kind of got into the aluminum housing a little bit, but there's still enough there that'll make a decent seal. So on to the next one on the bottom side now. Start to split this from the bottom casing. There are 1, 2, 3 bolts on the top end. This one is the longest out of them, as you can see, a little longer. And then they have 3 up and down each side. Middle one is longer on them. So then you get to this, and then your seal will be directly under this guy. All right, so I finally got to this rear seal. It's got a small gear here. Flip it around. It's got a small gear sitting there. There inside the bearing. And this bearing, unfortunately, was trapped inside the housing and the shaft came out. So what I did in order to get it out was I took a 1-inch socket, put it on there, and then heated the external housing to give it a little bit more clearance, and then it gave it one good pop with a pound hammer, soft blow, and it popped right out. So now you finally have access to this inner seal. We'll try to get it out now. So in order to pop this rear seal out, I just grabbed an 1.25 inch socket and it fit perfectly in there. Gave it a few good taps and it just popped out the other side. And that is how you finally get your worn seal out and stop that leaking front drive shaft. Thanks for watching.